Our world today is divided into two time zones. There's AC, which is after COVID, and there's BC, which is before COVID. What was my journey, which I found was, I passed through different stages in India's own development. Wasn't easy. 1951, 4 years after independence and 4 years after we had fought a very expensive war forced on us by Pakistan in Kashmir. Huge cost to us for a struggling young economy. We took a wheat loan of 2 million tons from the US in 1951. At the time of independence, we had 1.3 or 1.4 billion pounds in our sterling reserves held in England, the Bank of England. England at that time was broke because of the First and Second World Wars. And this was the money owed to us because of our participation in the war effort. So they tried every trick in the book not to give it to us. First, there was a devaluation of the sterling, which meant that we probably lost a third of our reserves. And then they created one account, account A, from which we could use it to buy what we wanted, but account B, we could only use it to pay pensions of fellows living in Britain who had served in the British Indian Army. We had to pay that. We had to also pay them the separation, all their civil servants, the separation amounts, etc. So it was tough, but our foreign exchange by 1956 had collapsed. We then introduced all those foreign exchange regulations and so on. We stumbled along, even as our population continued to rise relentlessly. Now, I still recall there was a fellow who would come, a grocer who would bring bread to us in the late 50s to our home. And we didn't have machines to cut bread, so he would cut it with a huge knife. And every conversation, because I would go out the main door to take the bread, he would then write it in a book, and at the end of the month, we'd pay. Bread was at that time 50 paise or something like that. And he would always complain. He says, you know, look at the inflation. Look, everything is so expensive. Everything is on fire. Now we're talking about the late 50s. And I would smile at him and I said, where are you from? And he said, I'm from Jhang in former Pakistan. Things were so much cheaper during the British era. But now that we are independent, how have I benefited? That was his point of view. 65, we were forced into another war just 3 years after we had fought China, in a war that didn't go too well for us. We were still recovering. We were still trying to rebuild the military. We were trying to rebuild our morale. And then we got attacked in Kashmir again by Pakistan. Every Pakistani dictator, if you read his biography or his autobiography or his book, he boasts about how he attacked India, whether it was Ayub Khan or Yahya Khan or this Musharraf or whatever that fellow's name is, who pretends to be dying but refuses to die. All of them talk about when they attacked India. So we were attacked in 65 at huge expense to both countries. But they were a dictatorship, so their people never found out. We are a democracy. It cost us a lot of money. It was a multiple whammy for us, son. That same year, the rains had failed. I recall distinctly that the earth of my country, India, lay cracked and gaping from south to north. There was no water, there were no rains. Absolute dry, including in the Punjab. India's then Prime Minister went to the United States because they had loaned us wheat. They were a superpower, tremendous surplus food production. She went to ask for food aid. A major American newspaper, I still keep the clipping, headlined, "New Indian leader comes begging," because the person who fought the war, Lal Bahadur Shastri, had died in Tashkent, where we signed the agreement with Pakistan, where we gave back what they had What we had captured, they gave back to us what they had taken, and we were back to ground zero.
Yes.
So this newspaper reported, and then there were a lot of snide comments. The Indians are very good at making babies, but they can't grow food. And the then president of the United States was a Texan, a fellow called Lyndon Johnson.
Okay.
He agreed to let us import 9 million tons and 11 million tons of wheat. This is the hard red California variety in 66 and 67. But he would control every shipment himself because he didn't like our independent foreign policy. We told the Americans, you're messing around in Vietnam, you shouldn't, you did these bad things in other places, you should relax, you shouldn't be doing all this. He was very upset. So he would release the shipment whenever she called him, Mrs. Gandhi called him.
Okay.
There's an English expression that you live from hand to mouth.
Yes.
We were living from ship to mouth. I remember those days. And we were told, don't eat a meal on Monday evenings. We have to save wheat. I have slept hungry 52 Mondays in 1966.
Okay.
Not because we couldn't afford it, but I felt that it was a national emergency and I should play my part. I have slept hungry. We didn't have milk. The Delhi milk scheme and all these milk schemes in different states were created to control supply of milk, to ensure supply of milk. We could only invite 25 guests to a wedding or to a party. We started making cars at the same time that the Japanese did in the late 40s. We had to book a car and wait 20 years. Ditto for the telephone. We were in very bad shape. That was a period of our humiliation. And your farmer, who at that point of time was using traditional methods of farming,
Right.
who did not know what was happening. He then got his act together with civil servants, with scientists, with engineers. And the Green Revolution came. You heard that, which so many people in the world, so many developing countries want to emulate. But our conditions were peculiar at that time. There was an American scientist called Dr. Norman Borlaug. He came. He introduced the dwarf variety of wheat so that when the strong wind comes, the older varieties would topple over. This didn't. It was resistant. It was a stout variety. He came to India and he has himself said, I said, let's test it. But when I saw the conditions in India, I said, forget the testing. Let's start growing. And that's what happened, leading us today to be the second largest producer of food grains in the world. That was a very difficult time. Our best and brightest left India, not because they were persecuted in any political sense. They were economic refugees or economic migrants. They wanted a better life. And most of them, in the 40s and 50s, most of them would run off to England. But thereafter, the United States, which had opened its doors, removed all quotas on immigration and so on. So several people, including my own brother, made a beeline for the United States. Our best and our brightest. 70s and 80s, 73 was the first oil price shock. We were huge importers of oil because we were trying to develop, we needed energy. 1980s was an oil price shock. We were in bad shape. I recall distinctly. People talk about Bangladesh. We defeated the Pakistani army. We took 92,000 soldiers as prisoners. Why did we release them? Well, because as per the Geneva Convention, we can't keep them forever.
Right.
And in any case, it wasn't our intention to destroy West Pakistan. What we wanted to do, for whatever reasons, right, wrong, indifferent, we had to participate in the emergence of a new nation called Bangladesh because we couldn't deal with the burden of refugees. We had 10 million of them. in the state of Tripura. In fact, they outnumbered the residents of the state of Tripura. Yet the people of India opened their hearts and minds and purses.
Yes.
By 1991, son, we had less than $2 billion in our treasury. We needed some essential imports. And so we went to the IMF for a bailout. We had no money. What Pakistan is going through today. For its 13th bailout, we had this in 1991, the last one ever. So they told us that we don't think your economy is strong enough. They insisted on devaluation of the standard IMF prescription. We devalued our currency. We tried to remove price controls. We did whatever we could in terms of liberalization. But since they didn't trust us, they said, keep 67 tons of your gold physically in the Bank of England and the Bank of Switzerland for a $600 million loan. We sent our gold there. I remember 1991, I was 40, going into my boss's office, sobbing on his shoulder, saying, why this? What have we come to? How did we reach this stage? He put his arm around me and he said, Deepak, this too will pass. And today we sit on $700 billion of foreign exchange reserves. Let me tell you, Mr. Madhishetty, it wasn't an easy time for us. Then in 91, we had the liberalization. We opened up the economy, etc. And I believe if you have to look at an inflection point, it'll be the early 90s, when India's comprehensive national spirit came alive again. That's what I would say was India's renaissance. Mobile telephony entered. I had one of the first, interestingly, mobile telephone sets in the country. Had a very interesting number also. And I used to use it, I used to flaunt it, may I say, to everybody. Well, you know, nayi cheez aayi hai to sabko dikhao. Not realizing it was 56 rupees a minute to make a call. When the first bill came, I spent the entire month's salary paying it. And thereafter, I locked up the mobile phone. Then we started talking about the Delhi Metro, then the Aadhaar card thing came about. And then our IT prowess. Indian companies then began to acquire assets overseas. One of the proudest moments of my life, 2008, when Mr. Tata took over Jaguar Land Rover. And then Airtel took over Zain in 2010. And our space technology delighted and amazed the world. How fast we were reaching out into space, launching satellites, whatever.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.